All right, let's try something similar with the narrative passage, which will be Joshua. And we will do the same thing. We will first of all set it in context. And then we will look specifically at things that we do not understand. The book of Joshua is, Moses has brought them out of Egypt, but because of his sin, will not take them into the land. Joshua, his associate, will do that. They cross the Jordan River at flood stage. The map, this is the sea, Galilee. Okay. Here are the kingdoms of Sihon and Og. Huge territories. Israel has come up through this area and has taken them. And God has given permission for 2.5 of the tribes to settle in this area after they help their brothers defeat in here. Okay? So once they finish the conquest, then they can come back and settle in this territory. The nation goes across, and the first city that they will encounter is a city at sea level in the valley where the river flows, the city of Jericho. After that, they will move to the highlands area, and they will then attack a city called Ai. The highlands area is where the population mostly exists. Jerusalem is there, Hebron is there, all the vista sites. The large confederacies and alliances, north and south, are there. After that, you come down off the highlands and you hit the Philistine territory over here. Okay? It's a 3,000 elevation climb from Jericho into the highlands. It's about 12 miles from Jericho to get to Ai. They cross at the Jordan River and they settle in a plain here. Jericho is about, I want to say about 5 miles, I think, from the Jordan. So there's a big area there that they settle in. And 2 things happen in this area that they settle in. The first thing that happens is that God directs Joshua to send a representative from every tribe back into the Jordan River to find the biggest boulder they can dig out of the sand before the water comes back to cover it. And they bring those boulders, and my understanding is that they put them in a circle. I used to think that they piled them into a pyramid, but I think that, you'll see in a minute why I think it's a circle. But they put the stones in a circle, 12 of them, huge boulders. And Joshua says, when your children in later years ask you, what is the meaning of this circle? You tell them, our God brought us across the Jordan River with his great power to give us this land. This becomes a memorial. So that's the first thing that happens there. Then, as soon as they finish with that ceremony and settle down for the night, the next day, they circumcise all the males. Because 400 years in Egypt, as slaves, there's been no circumcision. And if they're going to live in this land, there's the covenant sign that God has given, which is circumcision. And so, again, a circle is cut off. And God will say, I have rolled. So the words circle, roll, continually come out of this chapter. I have rolled away through this circumcision act and through bringing you into the land, I've rolled away the reproach, the ridicule of Egypt. Because Egypt's ridicule was he got them out of our land, but he killed them in the wilderness. He couldn't take them into his land. And so now we have put to silence Egypt, and I have rolled it away. And so the city, this whole area now becomes a name. It's called Gilgal, which means circle or roll. Okay? 2 spies go into Jericho, and they meet a prostitute who is, she's gonna go with them. She has great faith. She knows her city is doomed. And she knows everybody in her city knows that. She will say to them, we have heard what you did to Sihon and Og. We know what your God did bringing you across us. We know we don't have a chance against you. And she will say, the hearts of our city are like water. They have melted like wax. In other words, there's no fight in us. There's no hope. There's nothing but despair. We know the disaster is waiting for us. And she will make that comment. And then she will say, will you, if I help you, will you spare my family? And they agree. You know that Rahab is spared. God had instructed them how to attack the city. They were to march around it one day, silently leave. Second day, same. Third, fourth, fifth, 6 days, same. Silence. One march and out. Seventh day, 7 times around. And on the 7th time around, the silence is broken. There's a shout, the trumpets, war trumpets sound, and the walls implode. All the soldiers of Israel who are surrounding on the perimeter rush to the center, and as they converge on the center, they put to death every living thing in the city. They were instructed to do that. Nobody alive was to survive. Now, that's a problem in our contemporary culture with Western sensitivities. And we can talk later, if we have time, about how can you handle that? How can you present that in a way where it makes sense to an American audience, okay? But basically, the iniquity of the Canaanites had reached the fullness of the cup, and God was claiming them back. He had said to Abraham, I'm going to give him 400 years. Huge line of patience. The iniquity, your descendants will go into Egypt for 400 years because the iniquity of the Amorites, the Canaanites, is not yet full. But now it has been. And so God is reclaiming them. God is reclaiming everything from the city. Okay? After they have put to death every living thing, they are to torch the city. They are to burn it to the ground. If there's something that won't burn, gold, silver, that's to be taken and put into the Lord's treasury. It will become part of the tabernacle and the temple. But everything in the city belongs to God. Now, this is the only city that they attack that he says this. I mean, all the cities, there's to be an extermination. But in the other cities, the soldiers can claim the booty. They can keep part of whatever they win, they can keep and enrich themselves. But the first fruits belong to God, and Jericho is the first fruits. It's the first in the land. And so God claims everything for himself. Okay? And he will have a technical term for that. He will say there are the devoted things. And it will show up in chapter 6, which is just before our chapter, and it will show up all the way through our chapter. It will be the Hebrew word harem. In our NIV, it will be translated devoted things, things devoted to the Lord. Some of the older translations, they will use the word ban. These are things that have been banned from humans. They belong only to God. It is the ban, the restricted, the limited, the things you cannot have. But God will specify that everything in Joshua is to be his. Okay? And we will read, and God will warn them in chapter 6, if any of you take the devoted things, if any of you keep anything out of Jericho for yourself, you will be liable for destruction. You, as a people, will be vulnerable to it being destroyed. You cannot keep any of the stuff for yourself. And so Israel, in chapter 6, follows through, and they do exactly what God said. They put to death every living thing. They torch the city. They put all of the metals into God's treasury. And then our chapter opens up. But, okay, Joshua 7. Let's go there. But the Israelites acted unfaithfully in regard to the devoted things. Specifically, a man named Achan, whose father was Carmi, and Carmi was the son of Zimri. Zimri was from the clan of Zerah, or the family, and the Zerites were one of the clans or families in the tribe of Judah. This man, Achan, took some of the devoted things, and the Lord's anger burned against Israel. I mean, you got 3 or 4 things in that first verse that need to be flagged. Okay? First of all, one man took stuff. His name is Achan. All right. But the text says Israel corporately is being held responsible. Israel acted unfaithfully. the Lord's anger at the end of the verse burns against Israel. Okay, you got a lot of problems with that, especially in America. It's not fair. Okay? All right, another issue is, why do we have this genealogy, this ancestry? Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zimri, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah. He's working his way from this one man all the way back up to the tribe. He's working his way up from the families and the clans to the very tribe. Why? Well, we're going to see this is going to happen twice in the chapter. Okay, the devoted things. Joshua, who does not know that this happened, now, in his strategizing militarily of what to do next, sends some spies to scout out Ai. He had done that with Jericho, worked out well. So he sends a few guys up to climb the mountain and go 3,000 feet at 12 miles and bring back a report about Ai. And they went and they spied it out. They returned to Joshua and they say, hey, you don't need to send the whole army for this one. Okay? Everybody's still overcoming the effects of the circumcision. It's a 3,000 feet climb, 12 miles. Let most of the guys rest. Just send up a few, 3,000, 2,000 or 3,000 people. And they go up and they are routed. And 36 casualties occur. As far as I know, this is the only mention of casualties in the book of Joshua. Of all of the battles, this is the only one where Israelis lost their life. 36. And the rest of them were sent running with their tails between them down the hill to try to get away from the men on top. And chapter 5 repeats the language that Rahab had said about her people in Jericho. Verse 5. The hearts of the people melted. Israel has become vulnerable to the destruction that God said. Joshua still does not know what the reason for this is, and he is stunned. He agonizes. He has no explanation for this. And he sees that this portends disaster for Israel. Up until now, they were invincible because God was with them. God has allowed this. Joshua's first words, he tears his clothes. He is on the ground for hours, face down for hours, and he is in front of somebody. He says, you are sovereign, sovereign Lord. You allowed this. You determined this. You are sovereign. Why? Why did you bring us out of Egypt if this was the intent? Why not leave us on the other side of the Jordan River? There's enough land for all of us over here. We're going to have a terrible time trying to crowd ourselves into this narrow strip. We could have easily all settled over there if we'd have been content to stay on the other side of the Jordan. What can I say? We've been routed. The enemies, the inhabitants of this land are going to realize they can take us. They outnumber us. We have no way of standing against us. They'll band together. They'll wipe us off the face of the earth. And the Egyptians will start up all over again. What will you do for your own great name? It won't do your reputation any good, God, when they take us out. What's going on? He doesn't know. God comes back with very abrupt language. In the Hebrew, these are staccato sentences. Stand up. What are you doing? Israel has sinned. Israel has violated my covenant. Israel has taken some of the devoted things. Israel has stolen. Israel has lied. They have put these things in their own possessions. That's why this has happened. They have been made, and God quotes his words in the previous chapter, they have been made liable to destruction. And then here is the most ominous statement. I will not be with you anymore unless you deal with this. You will experience the same defeat from now on. unless you do something about this. Well, now Joshua has an answer as to the reason why, but now he has to know, how do I deal with it? He has no idea who this is. Who is it? Okay? And God says Israel has done this. So who in Israel? How many of Israel? Were there 4,000 men who did this? What happened? What is this? And so God gives him the instructions as to how he's going to find out. Okay? And one of the things you have to flag is when you say, verse 14, in the morning present yourself tribe by tribe, what does that mean? Does that mean 450,000 Benjamites are coming? Or actually, it wouldn't be that many Benjamites, 180,000. 400,000 Simeonites? I mean, is Joshua looking at 2.5 million people coming in front of him trying to figure this out? No, okay? It means that each tribe sent up a leading representative. So they present themselves tribe by tribe. So there's the elder of Simeon, there's the elder of Naphtali, there's the elder of Dan, and there they are. Okay, and I got 12 representatives in front of me. Verse 14, the tribe that the Lord takes. And when you studied it in Hebrew, you would look up the vocabulary of takes, and that's a military term. It's a warfare term. It's the word capture. The tribe that God captures. God is now warring against his own people. Now, how does God capture a tribe? How does God indicate a tribe? Is there some arrow that points out of the sky on top of one of the guys? No. Okay. What was the process by the Lord's taking it? And so you probably will come up with the casting of the lots, which was often used. And the process was that you probably had a kind of a jar, a narrow-neck jar, and you had a couple of stones in it. One stone was white and one stone was black. When I preached on this, I found myself one of the vases of it. I put a couple of, I don't know, what game was it that I had black and white stones in front of it. And I shook it up, and white stone, Simeon, you're okay. White stone, Dan, you're all right. Naphtali, no problem. Black stone, Judah. The rest of you all can go home. I want you in the next hour to bring a representative of every leading family of Judah. I mean, okay, or of all the clans. You're the tribe. We want the clans. So he comes back with 18 guys. Go through the whole process, and now it's, what is it, Zimri, who's at the top of the genealogy. And then we go through it as Zimri. Okay? Now the rest of you guys can go home. Zimri, you bring back all the families that you're under Zimri. And up comes Carmi. And we're getting it down to individual families. All right? Carmi, I want every male member. I want all your brothers and your uncles and your sons and your nephews. Every male member of Carmi, get him out here. And here's Achan. You know, I mean, he's in 2.5 million. They'll never find me. And it's his tribe. And now here he stands. There's 32 male members of Carmi. And that dumb white stone keeps falling out. Mm-hmm. He knows what's going to happen. It hits him. And we have that genealogy again. Early the next morning, verse 10, they came by tribes, Judah captured. Clans of Judah, Zerahrites. The clan of the Zerahrites come forward, families. The Zimri family. Joshua had his family come forward, and Carmi is taken. And then Joshua says to this man, and you got to flag this, my son, we're going to stone you to death, but before we do, how about a testimony? Give glory to God, and then we're going to kill you. And I'm thinking, Joshua, what do you expect the guy to say to you? I mean, he'll spit in your face, or he'll up yours, Joshua. No, Achan says, you're right, I sinned. Well, there's some psychology going on here that doesn't sound like how it would play out in any movie we would make. Joshua asks for him to give glory, and the man does. And then they stone him to death. They find the stuff. They bring it out. They destroy it like it was supposed to be destroyed. The metals are put in the treasury like they were supposed to be. And then, verse 24, Joshua, together with all Israel, representatives of each tribe, they take this man, they take all of his animals, they take his children, his sons and his daughters, they take him to a valley, which they will give a name to. None of these places had names until Israel gave them names. And Joshua will say, you brought trouble on us. The Lord will bring trouble on you. And that's the valley of Achor. Achor, the word Achor means trouble. And it's kind of a pun on Achan, the name of the man. Achan brought Achor on Israel. Achan brought trouble on Israel. And so they will call it the valley of trouble. And the pile of stones will be a memorial that you are not to bring trouble on your fellow Israelites by disobeying God. But, the end of verse 25, they stoned him and they stoned the family. Now you got a problem with that. You got to flag that. Because the kids are getting stoned for what their dad did. And how do you explain that? So you can see there's lots of things to flag as we go through. Okay? The devoted things on the bottom of page 1, I've explained that as a technical term. Its first appearance was very positive back in the book of Leviticus. I've given you the verses there. Here is what they are. In Leviticus, the Lord said, it is possible for somebody to voluntarily devote something to the Lord. This would be a very positive thing. But once you gave it to the Lord, it was no longer yours. It was His. It was His. It was holy to the Lord. Okay? You could not take it back. If you gave a slave to the temple or a person, you could any land, it couldn't be redeemed. You couldn't say, I changed my mind, let me buy it back. Or I decided he was a good worker, let me give you 2 in exchange for him. No, once it went to the Lord, it could not come back. Okay? And so you can give some contemporary examples of how people very voluntarily, I mean, when I pastored in Scottsdale, we had a man that owned 5 restaurants, Western steakhouses, and the profits from one steakhouse all went to Campus Crusade. Profits from another steakhouse were devoted to a Christian school in the city of Phoenix. He lived off of one steakhouse, and the others were devoted to the Lord. So you can give contemporary examples of that. Now, anybody that God asked for to be given to him had to be given to him. You could not buy them back. If somebody committed a sin for which God said there was death, you couldn't offer money in exchange for their life. And then Leviticus goes on to say that a tithe is a devoted thing. It is one of the things which is to be given to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. And I was talking about this once. I was in Israel, and they had their Hebrew Bibles open, the guys, and one of them said this phrase, holy to the Lord. That phrase, holy, it's the same phrase that is used to describe the inner sanctuary of the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies. It is the holiest of holy things to the Lord. The tithe is the equivalent of that inner sanctuary, Holy of Holies, where the ark was kept. And so the tithe is one of the things that becomes harem. Okay? I've already explained that the word takes is the word capture, and I've already explained the pun that you see on the top of page 2. You'll read about that there are 3 kinds of commentaries on page 2. I've given you kind of a listings of some of the ones that I looked at as I was studying on the passage. The expositional commentaries, and you'll see that Dale Ralph Davis, the guy said if he wrote it, buy it. No falling words. Put an asterisk by it because that was really helpful. The asterisk indicates which books I found exceptionally helpful. The expositional means it's kind of a commentary written by a good scholar but designed for an intelligent, capable Sunday school teacher to teach an adult class. It doesn't go into all the exegetical details, probably doesn't have any Hebrew or Greek in it, but written by a good person for a contemporary audience. The exegetical ones are the ones that really cost you a lot of money. They're the big ones, the fat ones, the ones you pay 50, 60 bucks for. The sermonic ones are ones which represent somebody's sermons. I found them disappointing in Joshua. No asterisk. Very hard to find sermonic ones which are seriously dealing with the text and not just spraying in any different direction. It's just hard. You'll come across some good men. Obviously, MacArthur's will be that. Boyce will be good. There are other good men. And when you come across them, they're the ones you enjoy because they give you some ideas, either of relevancy or sometimes they have clever titles or they have clever phrases. You know, they have a good way of saying things because they're trying to preach it to their audiences. So they're helpful. All right, the results of study. This is now in paragraph form. We've got a huge narrative chapter, some 30-some verses, 27, 28 verses. So now I'm working it through section by section in the flow that the chapter moves. So the previous chapter, God had specified everything was harem and what that meant. This ban only occurred with Jericho. Subsequent battles could be taken advantage of. Chapter 1, verse 1, third paragraph, bottom of page 2. Achan, rummaging through the rubble, he disobeys the harem. Okay? Now, my explanation for why his sons and daughters were stoned is I assume they became a party to his deception. They are all living at this point in the campground of Gilgal. They have a tent, which isn't probably any bigger than from here to the wall back there. It's pretty hard in a tent to bury something in your tent without having your adult children know what you're doing and ask you about it. And they probably said, Dad, what do you got there? And you're not supposed to have that, are you? And he'd say, oh, yeah, but that's all right. Listen, this wedge of gold, probably about the size of a candy bar. Sonny boy, when we get into the land of Canaan, they're going to give us an inheritance in that land. We're going to get a little plot. Okay, it'll be all right. This is going to buy us 3 plots around our plot. We're going to be ranchers, baby. We're going to buy a plot with fruit trees and running water, springs. Okay? Okay? And baby doll, this bag of silver coins that I've gotten from here, we're going to marry you off to a really good guy. I mean, you wait and see the guy. This is a dowry for you. They're going to be lining up 20 deep wanting to marry you. We're going to pick the best one because we got the money to make you worth it to them. And honey, this robe, this Babylonian, you can't wear this for 10 years, okay? Because there's nothing in Canaan that produces this kind of robe. This stuff comes from Babylon, all right? Okay. But after we've been there for about 10 years and we start doing trading and some of this stuff shows up, this is going to be Nordstrom's all the way. And they're going to wonder where you got it from. Oh, man. Okay. So, otherwise, that's my answer for why it happened. Now, in some other cultures where there's a heavy emphasis on the sins of the patriarch are just absorbed and carried out on the children. That's one of the things patriarchs live with, and it's one of the factors that keeps them honest, because they know that if they do something bad, it's not just them, their whole family will suffer. If that's the culture that you're dealing with, the text does not say why the sons and daughters. So either of those explanations is entirely plausible, and so I'm going to go with the one that I can sell in America, which is the sons and daughters were part of the guilt in it, which I think is probably better because it is a small tent and it's pretty hard to bury something. Okay. So the rest of it just keeps on going, and it just goes through everything that I've already said to the end. Get down to the bottom. What is the theme? What is the theology? What is the point of this passage? Why did God give it to us? More than just to know the history of Israel. And you can go one of two directions on this. Obviously, at a general level, the theme is the sin of this one man brought disaster on the people of God. It is possible for one person's sin to have an impact on the entire believing community. And you can see I'm starting to use language which is moving into the contemporary church. It is possible for one person within the church to act in such a way so out of harmony with the will of God that the entire church suffers and loses the presence and the power of God, which is what happened. I will not be with you anymore. Now, I could do that. That's moving it up a level of generality, up a level of abstraction. But the New Testament tells me there are lots of sins that fit into that category. The sin of gossip, the sin of bitterness, the sin of anger. There are lots of sins which can disrupt the unity, harmony, and sweet fellowship of a Christian congregation, causing people not to want to be part of it, a poor testimony within the community, weakness and impotence within the church, and in usefulness to God, which is what's happening with Israel. So I got lots of sins that can do that. If I can stay at the level of specificity that the chapter is at, rather than moving to the generality, then I try to do that. And in this chapter, the specific sin is somebody took something that God said was mine. Okay? And if I can work that fit the message around that, then that's what I'm going to do. The fact that Leviticus says that the tithe is harem. The fact that Malachi says, you have robbed me of the tithe and you are under a curse. Then I think that that's the theme that the Scripture is presenting. I'm going to carry that theme over into the message. So that the message is going to talk about the sin that made the people of God impotent, that removed God's presence and power from the congregation, was someone in the group taking something, keeping something, stealing something, robbing God of something that God said was his. And so the tithe is going to become, the sense of giving to God is going to become where the focus will be. But again, we have studied the passage thoroughly, and we have arrived at a sense of what is the biblical flow of thought. What is the author's progression of ideas? We are halfway, in fact, we're almost all of the way toward an outline of the biblical passage. We don't have an outline of our sermon, but we have a sense of we can now think our way through the passage, accurately understanding everything in it.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.